Hello and welcome to the ATAR Notes podcast for the first time in 2019. My name is Nick and I'm here with Olivia, who just finished Year 12 last year. Olivia, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I'm Olivia. I finished Year 12 in 2018 as Nick said, and I'm studying aerospace engineering at UNSW.
Yeah, so aerospace engineering obviously sounds pretty impressive. I'm not sure if heaps of people would truly be aware of what it even is, or engineering more in general as well. I'm sure we have a lot of listeners interested in engineering. So the point of today is just to run through a few user-submitted questions, so questions that we got through Instagram, and to let Olivia kind of answer them and kind of explain to us what engineering actually involves. So before we get into that though, Olivia, I just want to touch on your Year 12 just briefly.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had a couple of questions about that. So the first one is, how did you find Year 12 in general?
Well, it was very overwhelming with the amount of stress that I had to deal with, because I was doing major works and on top of that trying to manage with my extracurriculars, making sure I'm doing scholarship applications, and on top of that studying. It was a full-on year, but I survived somehow.
Yeah, great. And what kind of subjects were you doing? Like, were you doing mostly math or science or English?
It was a mix. I was doing some maths and physics, but then I was also doing some humanities subjects, so modern history, society and culture, studies of religion, and yeah, English as well.
Yeah, cool. And do you think that mixture has kind of put you in good stead for university, or have there been any subjects in particular that have been helpful for you?
Well, at first I wasn't sure how this mix of subjects is going to help me because clearly maths and physics would definitely help. But I feel like doing a bit of humanities can help because, for example, in my engineering class, we have reports to do, and there are some people who were still struggling with references, and humanities has taught me how to do different types of referencing. And yeah, I feel like people think that with engineering there's a lot of maths and physics, which is true, but there's also the soft skills component that you have to consider, and that's something that the lecturers and our tutors have talked about a lot. They've always pushed this thing of you have to develop your soft skills in order for you to, be ahead of the game when it comes to, looking for jobs and yeah.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. If you had to break it down, just coming from somebody who's entirely ignorant about engineering, what kind of proportion of engineering is kind of like the heavy math and science?
Well, to be honest, I'm actually a bit unsure with that because I've only just started. But
Yeah, of course.
with my engineering course which was what I did last term, it's a bit of a mix actually. I would probably say it's like half and half because on one hand we were doing a bit of programming. We got to make sure we were building an autonomous vehicle, so we had to make sure we have our dimensions worked out in with the track that we had to work with. And there was a bit of physics involved with designing gears and that kind of thing. But then again, as I mentioned, with the report writing, we had to do presentations, that kind of thing. So I would probably say it's a bit of probably say it'd be 50-50.
Sure, yeah. We've had a couple of questions just kind of on that point of people who haven't necessarily studied math at a particularly high level through Year 12, but are still interested in engineering. Do you think those students would kind of struggle in the first year, or is it a big disadvantage to have not done that kind of higher level math through Year 12?
Well, I feel like regardless of what level of maths, it'd still be a challenge. This is coming from someone who did Extension 1 maths, the HSC level, and then dropped down. I'm not sure what the Victorian equivalent of that is, but and Extension 1 maths was the required knowledge, and the thing is, it was a struggle, but they do reteach a lot of the concepts to you. For example, they taught us complex numbers, which is part of Extension 2 maths, which is the highest level of maths in HSC. or they taught us inverse functions, which was a concept in Extension 1 maths. And so, yeah, they reteach the stuff to you. So the only difference is that you got to be prepared for like how fast they're going to go through the content, which because they're going through like a term's content crammed with like within like 2 hours or so. So it's something that you have to prepare for in advance, and that was something that I did. So during the last 2 weeks of holidays before uni, I actually tried to brush up my knowledge in maths just to make sure that I hit the ground running and not just show up to uni confused all the time.
Yeah, nice one. That's really good advice. I think for those people who kind of have asked those questions or who are a bit unsure about, I guess, their own mathematical ability, that there is always another option to brush up in a different way, whether that be like independent study or like doing other courses or things like that as well. Fantastic. So thinking back to your year 12 and kind of at the end of year 12 when you had to put in preferences for your uni courses, we've had a couple of questions which have been like, did you always know that you wanted to do engineering, or did you change your mind like last minute? For you, what was your kind of experience with that?
I've always known I wanted to do engineering. It was more of like which field of engineering I wanted to do. So it was like mechanical, but biomed sounds pretty interesting. And it wasn't until like late high school when I figured aerospace would be really cool, because I learned about how like flight has been a concept that we don't completely understand, yet it's an integral part of like transportation. And so that was something that I wanted to explore, and that's how I got interested in aerospace. And because I figured out about it pretty early, figuring out the preferences wasn't too bad for me. It was more of like putting aerospace like as my first for UNSW, and then maybe aerospace, and then in another university, and then going down to like mechanical engineering, because it was like the closest thing I could get to.
Yeah, sure. So just for those who aren't fully aware still, can you just explain what aerospace engineering actually involves?
Yeah, so it's more looking at air and space flight. You're like designing aircrafts, that kind of thing. It's commonly confused with aeronautical engineering, so I'd like to emphasize that aeronautical is commercial airplanes, aerospace is like rockets, space shuttles, that kind of thing.
Cool. Yeah, I think you've definitely got the cooler of the two.
Yeah.
So do you have any regrets at the moment? Like if you, or say hypothetically, I'll change the question a little bit. Hypothetically, if you got, say, a year or 2 years into your course, and then you thought, you know what, I actually would prefer to go to, say, mechanical engineering. Is that a possibility for you?
Yeah, the thing is, mechanical and aerospace are quite similar. The first 2 years are exactly the same. It's third and fourth year, that's when you start to specialize.
Okay.
And yeah, even if I complete an aerospace degree, I could still technically go into the mechanical engineering field, because they're so similar.
Okay, cool. Well, that leads nicely into a question we actually had about careers. So, at the end of your degree, what kind of jobs would this qualify you for? Or, like, what kind of jobs would you potentially be looking for?
The Defense Force is definitely an option. I remember when I went to an engineering camp, I was given the opportunity to visit the Air Force, and that was something that they talked about, how aerospace engineers are always like hired for the defense.
Yep.
But also going overseas is definitely a possibility. Of course, we have NASA and SpaceX, but then Europe also has a thriving space agency, so that's something to consider. Something that's not common is that you could also go into formula racing, because as I said before, mechanical and aerospace are similar, and so because there's like thermodynamics involved in designing those vehicles, you could definitely go into designing race cars and that kind of thing.
Nice. Is this like a niche area, or like how many kind of jobs would there be out there if you're aware? Like, is it a saturated market, or are there lots of jobs kind of going?
I would actually say that there is. It's just that it's a very narrow field, which is why we don't hear it a lot.
Right.
Like aerospace is a thriving field, and I'm pretty sure I remember last year in the budget the government was also talking about how they want to start a space agency, and yeah, I would actually say it's a thriving industry right now.
Cool. Let's move on to questions about kind of your uni day-to-day experience. So what uni is actually like for you. One of the most common ones is, what's your schedule like at the moment? Like, are you at uni 5 days a week and just getting absolutely hammered with work, or do you have a couple of days off, or what does it look like for you?
Well, last term I was at uni every day, so
Yep.
it was very tiring. My usual schedule each day is usually I would at least have like a 2 hour lecture
Mhm.
at least each day, and then maybe I'll have like a tutorial
Mhm.
maybe in the middle, or maybe like a lab because I was taking physics as well. So that's my standard schedule. The next term, I'm excited to have a day off.
Nice.
uh, but it's still the usual. I'll have 2 2 hour lectures in a day, and then maybe a tut and a lab, that kind of thing. So that's how my schedule is.
Cool.
But the thing is, like, because it's mostly lectures, you don't have to go to them, but I like to attend them because I know I'm not going to watch the lecture recordings.
So just briefly, like, what's the difference for you between a lecture, a tut, and a lab?
So lecture is where you learn the content, and it's a very long lecture, usually 2 hours.
Hmm.
A tut is basically it's a smaller there's only like 20 to 30 people in your class, and
Yeah.
that's the time where you get to ask questions to your tutor, and your lab is basically you basically do an experiment during the set time, and then you have to like do the questions in the lab manual,
Yep.
and those and it gets marked and gets added to your final grade.
Cool. Okay, another question here. What's your work-life balance like at the moment? Do you have other jobs? Do you have a social life, or is it just completely uni at the moment?
Well, I'm still trying to figure out how to juggle like work and life, but
Yep.
I have been doing extracurriculars last term. So
Hmm.
one one extracurricular I signed up for is volunteer development program, which is hosted by Faculty of Engineering Society, where like I attend a couple of workshops on soft skills, and then I do 15 hours of volunteering, and that gets recorded to your AHEX,
Well,
which is your academic transcript.
yep.
So yeah, and then the other thing I was doing was it's called the Protege program, which is hosted by Women in Engineering Society, where you're kind of like partnered with someone who's doing a similar or same degree as you, and they're older than you, and they'll help you out, and you get to meet people who are doing like similar or the same degree as you, and it was and the whole point is to like make friends, considering how like a lot of firsties are very nervous about like making new friends,
Yes.
which is something that I felt, and which is why I thought it'd be a good idea to sign up for, and it was great. And I met 5 other girls who are doing aerospace, and it was really cool to hang out with them and talk to them about aerospace.
Yeah, nice one. We've actually got a couple of questions just on that topic. So in terms of finding friends, I guess specifically in engineering, but just at uni in general. So you've kind of touched on the extracurriculars. Um, what's your experience been like? Do you have any particular advice for finding those new people?
Well, that was something that I was also concerned with, and I feel like the best way to make friends, regardless of what degree you're doing, is, hey, I'm going to go to this class. Am I in the right spot? That's how I
Yep.
made friends. And yeah, that's the best way you kind of like go up and start a conversation with them. They always say like, this is coming from someone who doesn't usually go up to random people and talk.
Yeah.
It was something that helped me a lot, because I'll be like, hey, am I in the right place? And then they'll be like, yeah, sure. And then we'll have a conversation of what degree you're doing, what classes are you doing this term. And that's something that I did not only in class, but also in like social events where like at my uni they'd have like barbecues, and so you'd kind of like come for the free food, but you're also seeing a bunch of people there, and that's where you talk to people and network as well. So
Sure, yeah. It's funny how, and I think I've said this before, but it's funny how once you get to uni, like all of a sudden you've just got that golden question, like, oh hey, what are you studying? Oh cool, like do
yeah,
you like it? Oh, what do you want to do after that? Like you've just all of a sudden got all these different things you can talk about, which is really cool.
yeah, it's very interesting to hear what kind of degrees people are doing and what kind of weird and wonderful combinations of degrees that they're doing as well.
Yeah, definitely. Is it the case with engineering that you can do engineering units without actually doing the degree? Because when I was at uni, I was doing arts, so you'd have like law students, science students, commerce students doing the same units. Is that a similar thing with engineering, or is pretty much everybody in your units doing eng?
Well, with engineering, like say in maths and physics, there's a lot of in term one. There's a lot of students taking those subjects. So whenever
Yep,
the lecturer is like, "Who's doing engineering?" and like more than half the lecture theatre would put their hand up and say, "Yep, we're
sure,
doing
yeah.
engineering." So we're kind of always like going in the same classes. It's like you start seeing people like the same people whenever you go to a lecture. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's usually the same people you see.
You're listening to the ATAR Notes podcast.
You mentioned you're in first year, so you've got lectures, tutes, labs, and stuff like that. Have you heard anything about internships yet, or what that will kind of look for you? Like, are internships important? Are they mandatory? Kind of what's the go with engineering?
Well, in UNSW, we have to do, it's compulsory to do 60 days of industrial training.
Mhm.
It depends on the uni as well. Like, I know with UTS, they also have a similar kind of program.
Yep.
But from what I was told, that 60 days of industrial training is mandatory in order for you to be officially registered under Engineers Australia.
Okay.
And you could technically do it during any part of your degree, but usually it's recommended that you do it in your third year because by that time you'd know like a little bit about engineering at least.
Yep.
Yeah, whereas like if you do in your first year, all you know is like a bunch of maths, maybe a little bit of computing as well.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and so usually a lot of the good thing about the society, like a lot of engineering societies, that they always promote like, hey, there's this opportunity where you could do industrial training with this company, so you can apply if you want, and that's something that you should keep an eye out when it comes to internships and work experience, because it can be a bit difficult to get an internship, and which is why they've always been pushing on about soft skills and building up your resume in like first and second year, so then like in say like third year you're prepared to go look for industrial training and apply for these internships.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Okay, we're almost done. Just got a few more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what are you most excited for when you finish your studies?
Definitely traveling overseas and working there.
Nice.
One thing that I've kind of been considering is doing exchange overseas.
Yep.
Maybe like in Korea or maybe in Germany to to do a bit of work there. Maybe post grad. I'm not sure, but definitely going overseas and working with European space agencies.
No, that sounds awesome. You mentioned like post grad there. Do you have post grad study plans at all?
Well, my degree is an honors degree, so I get to do a thesis.
Nice.
At like in my fourth year, but
Mhm.
there I haven't done much research on post grad with engineering, but it is something like it would I would probably assume that there's an option. I know with biomedical engineering that's actually a master's degree, so in your fifth year you do a straight up master's. But yeah, it's definitely an option there.
Awesome. There was another question here which you kind of touched on a little bit, but did you consider studying something different? So like a completely unrelated type of degree, and then going to engineering post grad. Was that ever an option for you?
Well, Actually, I wanted to be a physicist when I was younger, and then I moved to engineering. Um, it was more like I was interested with it kind of went back to like I was more interested like theory of flight, and that's why I wanted to like dive into engineering. Plus, I found it a lot more interesting to apply like my knowledge in physics to real life situations, and make a bigger impact through engineering.
Cool. Very final question. If there was one thing you'd like those interested in engineering to know, then what would it be? Anything at all?
Maybe, well, don't be scared off by the fact that engineering sounds challenging. It is challenging, but I feel like all degrees have their own unique set of challenges. And so don't be scared off by the idea of engineering as challenging, because a lot of people have told me, hey, are you sure you're ready for engineering? And that honestly scared me off during the holidays, like before uni. But, everyone is on the same boat as you. And, you'll be faced with different set of challenges. And there'll be people there to help you. So don't be scared off by it.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. I think, like, with uni in general, going into first year, like, your lecturers and tutors and stuff, they know you're in first year. Like, they don't expect you to be at, fourth year level. And so there always will be support there, whether that be for engineering or for any other degree as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Olivia, and thanks everybody for submitting questions via Instagram.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. I'm sure we'll have other podcasts as well in the future with people doing different degrees and things like that. So keep an eye out on Instagram and other social channels for the question prompt. Otherwise, we'll link some free resources in the show notes. So there's an engineering section on the forums, a bit about engineering internships, also university journey journals as well, where you can see different people go through different degree types. But for now, thank you so much, Olivia, and thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the ATAR Notes podcast. For more free resources, hit up atarnotes.com.